Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, that gives me an opportunity to have a separate introduction. Well, guys, I've got to be honest with you. It's been a long haul to get to this place. In 2014, we passed a minimum wage bill. We ended up gutting that bill and going to referendum, and the voters and those minimum wage workers across the state and those who aren't direct workers said that we needed to raise the wage. We're here in 2019 still debating whether or not those who work hard every day deserve an opportunity to have their basic needs addressed. Senate Bill 1 would allow us an opportunity to do that. It is our minimum wage increase for a $15 an hour increase that would take effect beginning January 1 of 2020. That effect would take a 6-year phase-in to arrive at. So it won't be until 2025 that the full raise will be in effect, but I'm pretty sure the $1.4 million, 1.4 million workers, will hugely appreciate our efforts on today. The bill also provides for a tip credit to remain as it has in the previous stature, where tipped employees will receive 60% of their salary by their employer, and the other 40% is pretty much by the consumer, those of us who tip. The difference would be made up by the employer if they do not arrive at the amount of the minimum wage. And one of the concerns that we found throughout debate is that there is a considerable amount of wage theft that takes place around this particular area. We've addressed that in this legislation to make sure that we strengthen those labor laws and put sanctions in place that would encourage employers to provide the actual tipped wage. We've also considered our youth workers. We know that our 16 and 17-year-olds are working not just to enjoy movies and have a good time. We found that many of them are actually working to help out in the household. Some of them are actually young parents, and they deserve to have a decent wage as well. What we're going to do with them is take them up to $13 an hour, and then they will siphon off there. We also have in this bill a payroll deduction tax credit that will go to businesses who have 50 or fewer employees, and meaning full-time employees. So that could equate to 100 part-time employees, or however the business sets up that 2,000 hour structure. I think we have came to a compromise where we've negotiated this bill. It's not a new subject. It's not happening too fast. Say that to the millions of workers who's been stuck at 8.25 since 2010 because of our inaction. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Is there any discussion? Senator Sandoval, for what purpose you seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. President. To the bill.
To the bill, Senator.
Members of the Illinois Senate, today I stand and rise as not as Senator Sandoval, but as grandson of grandparents that came here at the turn of the century in the Bracero program to work in the stockyards and the meatpacking plants of Armour and Swift, and to work on the southwest side and back of the yards and building the railroads. I speak here this morning as son of immigrant parents that crossed the Rio Grande in 1959 and crossed the river and landed on the shores of Plymouth Rock, back of the yards, in search of the American dream, in search of earning a dignified living wage. They worked hard. This is a great country. It's a great state. Hundreds of thousands of Illinoisans, as well as millions of Americans, today are disadvantaged because of the federal wage that is considered a starvation wage, not a dignified living wage. It is not a wage that we as Illinoisans should be proud of. and we know that. And Leader Lightfoot has been preaching that for years. Governor Pritzker has provided leadership and made sure on the campaign trail that if he were elected, he would make this a priority. We must and will increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour over the next few years. Access to health care, burdensome college debt, access to higher education must follow in the upcoming months. Let us not also forget, as we raise the minimum wage for all Illinoisans, let's not forget about women. Equal pay for women. For women that do the same job that men do, but earn less. That also must be on the agenda in the upcoming months. I applaud Governor Pritzker for the leadership provided here in bringing us together today on this historic day, and the work of Leader Lightfoot and the Senate Dems. We have been the leader. This chamber has been the leader over the last 16 years since I've been here on many issues that affect the quality of life of many Illinoisans. And we're not going to wait for anyone else to protect and increase the guarantees that are afforded to all Illinoisans. I'd ask everyone for a favorable vote here this afternoon. Thank you.
Senator Schimpf, for what purpose you seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the sponsor yield?
Sponsor indicates you will yield.
Thank you. Leader Langford, thank you for being willing to answer some questions on this. This is an issue that I have gotten a tremendous amount of constituent correspondence on. And I think we all know in this chamber that, there's different types of constituent interactions. It's easy for the special interest groups to get people riled up and say, click on this button to send your elected officials an email. I'm not talking about those types of interactions. I'm talking about small business owners calling me up and saying, I'm really worried that I'm going to have to close my doors. I have a lot of people in small towns in my district that are worried that jobs are going to go to Missouri. And my understanding is that right now Missouri's minimum wage for 2019 is $8.60 an hour. My question that I would have, I know that you occupy a leadership position and you talk with some of the leaders in the Missouri General Assembly from time to time. Are you aware of any plans that Missouri has to raise their minimum wage?
Majority Leader Lightfoot.
Thank you for the question, Senator. I'm not concerned about Missouri. I'm concerned about Illinois residents who live in poverty, that work 2 and 3 jobs, who have children that are raised into poverty, families who can't afford or can't even think about their children attaining a higher education. I'm concerned about the economic stability that we can bring to families here that gives them more buying power, that gives them the ability to put gas in their car and have insurance and have food and just basic needs. Now, the state that you just mentioned, minimum wage, is higher than Illinois. You just said they were $8.60. We've been at $8.25 since 2010. If we had kept up with the minimum wage as we should, we would be in a much better place. I just want to give you an example of what it costs in 2019 down in Champaign-Urbana. $15.20 is where we should be for a single adult with a child. And we're at $8.25. So I'm sure their ends aren't meeting. I'm sure they're working more than one job to just get to that place. So my concern is not Missouri. My concern is Illinois.
Senator Schimpf.
Thank you for that response. And I think we all in this chamber agree that we do want to see wages go up so that people can have a better life. And the question is, what's the best way to do it? The other question that I would like to ask on behalf of some of my constituents is there has been, many of them have said, you know, we would like to see the minimum wage go up, but not to the extent that it's going to wind up being double all of our neighboring states once this is done. And the question that they asked me is there a possibility that we can have a two-tiered approach? One minimum wage for the Chicago area that can easily absorb it, and a different minimum wage for instance, my part of the state. Is that a possibility that's been considered? And if we're not going to do that, why not?
Majority Leader Lightfoot.
Senator, we did talk about regionalization during our debates. Actually, more of negotiation. We were just all at the table trying to figure out how to best get to a minimum wage that people can actually live on. And regionalization was an area that it just couldn't be figured out on how do you keep people wages lower. Like, how do you decide that someone down in Danville, how do you decide someone in Danville who need to make $14.66 today, how do you tell them that they should be held lower than $15 in 2025? The increase is a 6-year phase-in, if I may remind you. It's nothing that's happening in the first year, second year. It'll be a ramp to get us there. And so I don't know how you tell those low-wage workers that they deserve to stay in low wages because they live in Danville, or because they live in Champaign-Urbana, or because they live in Bloomington Normal. How do you tell your constituents that they don't deserve to be paid fair wages because of the part of the state they live in? There was never a proposal given to us either for consideration during negotiations. The most that I received was an example of the state of Oregon, an example of the state of New York. And I took a look at those two states and I thought, okay, they're not the state of Illinois. And I was not given any proposal.
Senator Schimpf.
Thank you for the answer, Leader, and I do appreciate your indulgence. Just one final short question, because I do want to commend you. I know that you have been working hard and negotiating to try to make this a better proposal. You know, we occupy different parts of the political spectrum, but I do recognize that you have been working hard on this. The last thing I just wanted to ask is, I did receive a letter from the Illinois Farm Bureau, which I know that we have talked about. Governor Pritzker has said that he does not want a continuation of the over-the-top venomous rhetoric that we've had at some points in the last couple years. The Farm Bureau, I think all of us recognize, is a trusted actor. I put a lot of stock in what the Farm Bureau says, and the Illinois Farm Bureau sent me a letter saying that they believe they have a study that says that a 10% increase in the minimum wage produces a long-run decline in agricultural employment of about 6.5% in remote rural counties. And I'm just wondering if, during your work on this bill, if you had a chance to take a look at that study.
Majority Leader Lightfoot.
Unfortunately, Senator, I was not given that study, but I can say that I've worked with the Farm Bureau over the years. They were invited to negotiations, but I believe Irma was their lead negotiator. In 2014, they participated in negotiations. In 2011, they participated. I don't know where they were in the negotiations this year, and they did not give me that study. But I do want to go back to Missouri for a moment because I was intrigued. Missouri, so that the full body know, has just voted for a minimum wage increase to go to $12 over the next 3 years. So we're actually in an alignment with other states across this country on acknowledging the high cost of living and where we need to be to move a lot of our residents out of poverty. And we'll be the 29th state. We're not the first state. We're not even in the top 10. We will be the 29th state to move our wage higher than the federal wage that exists today. So I believe we're on par with where we ought to be with our neighboring states. I believe we'll be on par with where we should be with the rest of the country.
Senator Shemp, to close to the bill.
Yes, thank you for your indulgence, Mr. President. I realize that a lot of other people are waiting to speak. This is something that really has created a lot of concern in my community just because of the agricultural sector and the proximity to Missouri and the fear that jobs are going to go over there. I would respectfully ask for a no vote.
Senator Collins, for what purpose you seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. President, and ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, to the bill.
Bill, Senator.
First and foremost, I want to commend and applaud Majority Leader Lightfoot for her leadership, her tenacity, her courage, and her commitment to this cause over the years. And today here is an opportunity, and thank you for the opportunity, Majority Leader Lightfoot. Here is an opportunity for government to act for the benefit of the common good. You know, many might ask, why is this the role of government? It's the role of government to rectify the policies that have created this great wage divide. Income inequality is not the sole result of unrelenting market and historical forces. It is a direct and tangible result of public policies whose very design and intent was to redistribute income of wealth upwards. Middle income workers make no more now than they did in the late 1970s. Such political choices and public policies like steep cuts to social spending, a tax on organized labor, deregulation and privatization, and tax cuts for the wealthy are just to name a few. There is something offensive about the term the working poor. These workers are not lazy. They do not lack initiative. They are poor because of wage stagnation. Many of them do the work and serve many of our loved ones when they change or empty the bedpans in these nursing homes for our loved ones. If you are the working poor living from paycheck to paycheck, one illness or natural disaster can put you on the street or standing in a food line like we saw many of the federal workers do over the government shutdown. According to reports, the United States has the highest child poverty rates in the developed world. As a state, as a nation, we can do better than that. So I want to commend and applaud the governor for moving, Governor Pritzker, for moving to try to rectify this income inequality. And this legislation, I am proud to co-sponsor. And this legislation will give workers more money to spend in their local communities, boosting the economy, making our state more compassionate and competitive. No studies, no credible studies bear out the claim that raising the minimum wage is bad for business or leads to higher unemployment. But what we do know for certain is that low-income individuals are more likely than higher income individuals to spend additional earnings quickly and locally. In every corner of this diverse state, in small towns and rural areas, in affluent suburbs, and in the inner cities, the people of Illinois went to the polls and raised their voices for raising the minimum wage. The voters we represent ought to guide our conscience and our votes today and in the future. With that, Majority Leader Lightfoot, I'm proud to stand with you and urge an aye vote.
Senator Barrickman, for what purpose you seek recognition?
To the bill.
To the bill, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to first start by speaking to Leader Lightfoot, who I know has done. This has been an issue close to her heart. I know she's done a lot of work on this, and I respect that. I do. I wish to focus some of my comments today to the concerns that I have that this proposal may have, particularly on our educational systems. And, you know, we sat through committee yesterday, and there was testimony, I think some testimony certainly from some business groups, but I think it's important to put our attention on some of the areas elsewhere around our state who are going to be impacted potentially very negatively by this type of proposal. I happen to represent Illinois State University, Heartland Community College, and in some fashion, many community colleges around East Central Illinois. As we all know, our higher ed system has struggled recently due to a lack of commitment from the state of Illinois to the important role that they play in helping educate our Illinois youth. I spoke with the president of Illinois State University this morning, now that we knew the full breadth of the proposal, and he and I walked through the impacts to ISU. ISU today employs some 4,000 to 5,000 student workers. Many of those student workers are minimum wage workers. In year one of this proposal, ISU will be encumbered with $600,000 of additional costs just for the implementation of this in year one. Over the life of the proposal, it means millions of dollars to ISU. And as we can all imagine, that same story, I believe, is going to be told by countless community colleges and four-year institutions around our state. They are faced with a tough dilemma. We all know that they're going to come here and ask Illinois for more money. They were going to do that before this proposal came about. Now they're going to need to ask for even more. In the absence of a commitment from the state to make them whole on this proposal, our university systems, our community colleges, are going to be tasked with the very difficult decision of doing harm to some of the very people that the previous speakers have said they want to help. Those student workers get no benefit from a wage increase if they don't have a job. And we know that our universities are going to be tasked with that choice of whether or not to continue to employ the high number of student workers that they do today, given this wage increase. Of course, they do have another choice, and that other choice is one that we have all struggled to figure out how to contain. They could simply raise tuition and fees and say, well, we'll cover the minimum wage hike through that. I think many of us, hopefully all of us in this room, would say that's a solution that we hope the universities, the community colleges don't embrace. The second area I want to address is our K-12 schools. There's been very little attention on the impact a minimum wage hike will have on our public schools, K through 12, 850 some school districts around the state. Those school districts today employ secretaries and nurses, cooks and bus drivers, the folks who help make the system run but aren't necessarily in the classroom. I spoke to many of my superintendents over the last several weeks, but certainly over the last several days. The comments that they gave to me: Jason, you guys have been working together for years now to improve the finances of our K-12 system. We appreciate that. We now have a new school funding formula. We have a commitment from the state of additional resources, and we want to put those resources to work in the classroom where you have all told us we should prioritize those dollars. This proposal jeopardizes that immediately. Some of our Tier 1 and Tier 2 schools, those schools who have the least ability to tax themselves and pay for the services that we want them to provide our students, some of those very schools are now going to be faced with the dilemma that the entirety of the increase in funding that they're receiving through a new school formula is now being used and must be used, mandated to be used, on non-certified staff to fulfill the mandate of a minimum wage increase. Add to that the impact those school districts are going to have on their pension obligations. Each school district has to make a contribution to IMRF. One of my superintendents says to me, Jason, this is nothing more than a mandate from the state of Illinois to raise property taxes in our school district. Consider that. Consider the mandate that this is sending, the message that this is sending to school districts who we have said we need you to hold your property taxes down, yet they are interpreting this as a mandate to raise property taxes throughout this state. I think this proposal has more work that needs to be done. I think there are many unintended consequences that may arise from it. I hope that if this measure advances out of the Senate today, that further work will be done in the House to address some of these concerns and some of the others that I'm sure my colleagues will raise here this afternoon. Thank you. I rise in opposition, of course, to the measure, and thank you, Mr. President, for the time.
Senator Hutchinson, for what purpose you seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. President. To the bill.
The bill, Senator.
So first thing I want to do is say thank you to my colleague, Senator Kimberly Lightford, because I know as long as I have been in this Senate, there's actually two things she will say that there's a reason why she's here. One is education, and we all know that. And the other one is this minimum wage bill, which she has filed every single year since 1999. So for all the people talking about how fast this is going, I want to say to my sister, congratulations on this day, because this is an incredible day, which leads me to the 1.4 million people across the state of Illinois that we're going to help. 1.4 million people who have been waiting since 2010 for an adjustment in their salaries. So what today really is an example of a day where we all get tested with our own words. If I had a nickel for every time somebody stood up and said, no one who works full-time should ever live in poverty. No one who works full-time should ever live in poverty. So while we decry people who require social service assistance and need rental subsidies and assistance meeting their basic needs, but we know that $8.25 is not enough to afford a market rate 2-bedroom apartment without a subsidy. You can't win for losing. Add to that childcare, add to that food, add to that the need to go to school, go to work, go to do any of those things that we ask people to do to be full participants in our society. What this means today, regardless of all the noise and the din that we hear outside about what's too hard for us to accomplish and what we can't do and how this is moving too fast and any other excuse you can have for not acknowledging the fact that in 2019, if you have ever said nobody who works full-time should live in poverty, today is your day to do something about it. Don't tell me what you believe in, show me. Our constituents need you to show them what you believe in. So for all these people across this state who wondered whether anybody was listening, if anybody heard you, if anybody in these hallowed halls of the General Assembly where we make the laws sees you, I want you to know today that we're going to take a vote that says we see you and we hear you. And today's the day we finally get a chance to do something about it. I urge an I vote for a lot of reasons. But most importantly, because there's not a single person sitting in here that doesn't know that we have constituents every day that wake up when it's still dark outside. And they work all day, they string together their sometimes hourly jobs to figure out how to make benefits, to figure out how to raise their kids. And when they get home, it's dark outside. And they start the second shift, the one that belongs to their family. And then they get up the next day and they do it all over again. And they don't have a lobbyist. They don't have anybody who's down here lighting fires on behalf of them. They don't have that. All they have is us. And we don't have the luxury of being myopic. We don't have the luxury of only taking one argument and saying that's supreme over anybody else's argument. We're charged with making very difficult, complicated decisions when we sit here on behalf of the one word that's in front of every single one of our titles. No matter where you come from, no matter what your district looks like, no matter how you got to this capital, the one word that's in all of our titles is state. I am a state senator. And there are 1.4 million people across this state who have been waiting for this day for so long. So I'm going to hit my button and I'm going to vote yes, and I'm going to do it proudly, even though it's hard, and even though for some it might be a little scary. Because for those people in my district, I need them to know that I see them and I hear them. And today's the day I finally get to do something about it. Thank you, Senator Lightfoot, and to the ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I urge strongly, and I vote.
Senator Rose, for what purpose you seek recognition?
To the bill, Mr. President.
For the bill, Senator.
Ladies and gentlemen, I could absolutely talk about the macro level impact of this, and yes, there have been studies done. The study Senator Schimpf cited was from the NC State Economist. It was a fall 2018 edition, and basically what it said was, and I'm not being repetitive because I'm going to fill in the rest of the quote. The studies show that small farmers are likely more vulnerable to the impacts of a minimum wage increase because they lack the scale of profitability mechanized and are more likely to encounter obstacles in securing financing. The study also found that a 10% increase in the minimum wage produces a long-run decline in agricultural employment of about 6.5% in most remote rural counties. So that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about those folks that aren't in Chicagoland. I want to talk about the folks that are being ignored in this bill because there's no regional discrepancy. So I'm not going to pretend to speak for anyone else's district, but I'm going to speak for Central Illinois. And it's not going to be me. I sent out a survey asking healthcare providers, businesses, not-for-profits, universities, senior centers, community colleges. I asked them what's it going to do when this is fully phased in. And I can start off with the simple ones that are just sort of very interesting in what their critique of the system overall is, discussing how minimum wages for young or retired people never intended for household wage of earners. Why wouldn't we spend more time increasing programs to create skilled trades for technical workers? To actually some other ones would force layoffs from one small business in Macon County. Here's a local village that I represent, Macon County. They have an interesting observation that over time this will decrease the number of job opportunities for young and low-skilled workers. Here's a very specific one from one of the biggest non-for-profits in Decatur, a non-for-profits that serves senior citizens and young people in after-school programs every day. This will cost them, when fully phased in, $426,000. Their average part-time person makes $4,000. So that'd have to compensate with 100 part-time positions or the functional equivalent of 9 full-time staff. That's just one non-for-profit in Central Illinois. Schools. Here's one of my school districts. It's a mid-sized school district for Downstate, Illinois. It's by no means the biggest or the smallest. But they talk about impact on people in theirs. Would have to look at discontinuing daycare programs or raising prices to families. Here's one of my smallest school districts. Probably have to let 2 aides go with a corresponding negative impact on students. Here's another small school district when this is all phased in. Have to look at laying off 6 employees. I doubt our district could operate with those cuts, and yes, there's going to be time to phase in, but she goes on, so we could either look to increase registration fees, again, that impacts families, increase property taxes, which gets back to Senator Berkman's point, or decrease instructional materials and technology available to who? The students. Let's look at senior centers. Here's a moderate-sized rural county in Downstate, Illinois, from the senior center. People would lose jobs. They're non-for-profit. Healthcare. This is assisted living for seniors. This is an interesting observation. Without getting into specifics of their facility, they said an unfunded mandate is mathematically impossible. Who will take care of the senior citizens? Universities. Much was talked about affordability of higher education. When fully phased in, I'm only going to talk about the 3 that I know, the 3 in my area, but when fully phased in, this would be a 17% cut to GRF, to EIU, which they'd either have to have a higher GRF or higher tuition or lay off employees. ISU, when fully phased in, would be about 11.3% cut to their GRF. U of I, system-wide, would be 12%. The effect on the Urbana campus alone would be about $57.4 million. By the way, that number is really interesting when you get even deeper into that. And you know, they could raise tuition, I guess, which gets back to affordability. They could, you know, lay off my constituents, you know, or they could lay off students. So the net impact of absorbing that when fully phased in would be 12,000 part-time students, 403 academic hours, 1,230 graduate students, and part-time help non-status of about 1,685 employees. Community colleges. Here's a response from one of my community colleges, and this is coming from I guess one of the employees there. Bottom line is raising the minimum wage sounds good to the public, but effectively raises prices for everyone. This mostly impacts the lower class when the prices get raised on what they're buying. It was sort of a summation there. And the last one, which I also found was interesting, which I think has been ignored in this debate, is that for many schools, our universities, and the schools and universities, this will impact the 3% salary cap, which then will feed into our pension issues in the state and will further exacerbate local school problems. So at the end of the day, folks, I'm not here to tell anybody in Chicagoland what to do or what the right thing to do is. But I was standing at Casey's yesterday and talking to Annie and Debbie, who take care of me every day. And the starting wage at Casey's is already $10 an hour, which is already higher than your first 2 phase-in points in this bill in Downstate, Illinois. It's already higher than that. But if people think that this is going to be somehow magic beans for Downstate, Illinois, it's not. It's not. There's going to be real consequences to this. There's going to be real consequences. And at the end of the day, you guys keep talking about who's going to be helped. I'm worried about who's going to be hurt. How many more people are going to get laid off? How many more people are going to lose their job? How many more college kids and students aren't going to have a work-study program? How much tuition is going to have to go up? Those things need to be worried about just as much. They need to be considered just as much as the other side of this coin. And until we're serious and honest about all of the impacts, positive and negative.
Going to wrap it up, Senator?
Positive and negative. This bill should not go any further, and if it's not going to have any thought put into the fact that one size does not fit all, downstate is not Chicago, Chicago's not downstate, it's going to have some pretty bad consequences in the long run, just like the NC State study proved. Thank you.
Senator McConchy, for what purpose you seek recognition?
Question to the sponsor.
Sponsor indicates you will yield.
Thank you, Leader Lightford. Do you have any estimates or any numbers on what kind of job loss this may result in statewide?
Majority Leader Lightford.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator, for that question. There you are, for that question, because I asked that question, and the business group could not provide any data to show any loss of jobs. In fact, we were in the subject matter hearing for labor, and that question was asked, and on the record, the organization representing said that they had no data to show that there would be any business loss. And then more on a personal note, the same groups, businesses that shared with me back in 2003 that they would go out of business, told me again in 2006 that they were going out of business. So it was really nice to see them 3 years later. And then I got so excited when I ran the bill in 2010, the same entities who told me that they were going to go out of business in 2003 and 2006 told me in 2010 that they were going to go out of business. And so I'm sure they're still around in 2019 because there's no data to prove that any business have gone out of business or left the state of Illinois as a result of a minimum wage increase.
Senator McConkey.
Thank you, Leader Lightford. To the bill.
The bill, Senator.
Thank you, Leader. So my understanding from the National Federation of Independent Business is that their estimate is that this would result in a loss of 93,000 jobs in the state. And there is some historical background to this. So when we raised the minimum wage in 2006, we did it from 2007 to a 2010 ramp. And during that time frame, in the first year alone, we lost 50,000 jobs in the state of Illinois. Now, I'll comment that this bill almost has no effect on my particular district. The wages in my area are already predominantly entry-level jobs, $15 an hour or above. So even with the ramp, we're already pretty well down the road on this. However, my district is not representative of the rest of the state. And I'd like to echo what Senator Rose just said in that I believe that a one-size-fits-all approach is exactly the wrong solution for an aggressive measure of this sort, especially given the historical numbers that we have. So this has been done in other states. New York, which is not exactly the bastion of conservative policy, raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour, yet included regionalization. There is one rate for New York City, there is another rate for the suburban areas, and then upstate New York had another rate that was then tied to inflation, so that those businesses in those areas that are not as economically prosperous as the city of New York City or the suburbs are able to afford that as their economies grow. And I believe that this lack of regionalization will further exacerbate the loss of jobs that we've seen in the past. And what jobs are lost in this case? It is entry-level, unskilled jobs that are the ones that end up being lost, especially without a regionalization factor. And for many people, this is the first step on the economic ladder to economic prosperity. The first way to get in, the first job that they get in order to get the skills and get the experience necessary to be able to get well-paying jobs down the road. And so without a regionalization factor, this is not a proposal I could support, and I would encourage a no vote. Thank you.
Senator Fowler, for what purpose you seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. President. To the bill, please.
To the bill, Senator.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I'm speaking on behalf of my district today, the glorious 59th, and the impact that this legislation could have upon my district. I also have received numerous correspondences, and this is not near all of them. And one of them actually was a survey that was sent to me they surveyed over 50 companies within my district. And nearly all, except for a select few, all were pertaining to their statement was layoffs, closures, cutbacks, etc. And I could go over this, but I won't do that today because I think that makes my point. And some of the others that I'll just briefly mention real quickly is one is a manufacturing company in my district that manufactures underground mining support equipment, such as mine cars. And his statement to me is, if this law goes into effect, we will have no choice but to leave the state of Illinois as our company cannot compete. We hate it for our many employees who work for us, as many of them for as long as 15 to 25 years with our company. But this huge leap in wages will prove to be too much for our company. This will also increase our work comp costs as well. We will also not be able to bring part-time college kids in for training if this minimum wage were enacted. From daycare centers that I received, numerous correspondences from daycare centers, and one simply states, basically, closures. That we currently own two daycare centers. The minimum age increase will have to raise the rates to our parents that already can't afford the high cost of daycare. So we will be forced to shut down. And one that's probably the most impactful to me, over and above the correspondence from all the community colleges, the school districts, the K through 12 school districts, that have said that they will lose hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's probably one of the most impactful is Southern Illinois University Carbondale, that has stated that Carbondale alone will be a $5 million impact. A university that already has been, as we know, constant decline throughout the last several years. And it's projected to lose another 11% of enrollment this next school year, which does not include this legislation. $5.8 million to SIU Carbondale, which includes approximately 2,300 student employees that could possibly and probably will lose those jobs, that rely on these jobs to help pay for their education. I've received tremendous correspondence from my mayors throughout my district that hire youth help, many of them underprivileged youth, in the summertime so they can have a job and make a few extra dollars, that will have to eliminate that summer help. And I come before you because my district, we live in some of the most gorgeous country in the entire Midwest. We have an incredible workforce. We're working hard for economic development within my district. We have some opportunities that does not lie anywhere else in the entire nation, such as the confluence of the Mississippi and the Ohio. But we've been left behind in Southern Illinois, especially my district. This legislation, I feel, will have the most adverse impact of any district in the state of Illinois. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Hastings, for what purpose you seek recognition?
To the bill, Mr. President.
To the bill, Senator.
I, too, have a glorious district. It's known as the Fighting 19th. And I want to commend the sponsor on taking into accommodation a few things, that being seasonal workers, temporary workers, youth workers. All of that has been included in this bill, and I thank you for that. I also thank you for easing the transition of this onto small businesses with the assistance of a small business tax credit that'll provide employers relief over a period of time so that employers do not have to lay off workers. I conducted similar surveys across my district, one in the form of an election in 2014 where 92% of one part of my district said they were for a minimum wage. 74% of another part of my district said they were for a minimum wage. 67% of a more conservative part of my district said they were for a minimum wage. My whole district said they were for a minimum wage. That includes a very conservative part and a very liberal part of the southwest suburbs of Chicago, which was directly hit by the industrial collapse of the south suburbs in Illinois. I also conducted another survey and sponsored a bill for home health care workers, people who have to go to work every day and help people. And whether that means getting them up out of bed and walking them into a shower, helping them bathe themselves, or even changing their diaper on a daily basis, a job that many of us in this chamber would never consider doing. We passed that bill out of this chamber and passed it out of the other chamber, and that minimum wage increase was vetoed. Those people have a tough job, and they get paid $8.25 an hour. And it's a shame that they don't get paid more for the tough job that they have to do. And looking across to the aisle, I wouldn't want to change any of your diapers for $8.25 an hour. I also represent social service providers, those that have to go to work every day where people have developmental disabilities or violent propensities, and they have no help. They have no control over that. They get paid $8.25 an hour. And for me today to rise and to speak isn't to make a statement or make a joke about changing diapers on the other side of the aisle. The reason I rose today is to speak directly to them and to say, I'm listening to you as your representative. I see the plight that you go through on a daily basis. I understand what it's like to wake up and not feel valued sometimes. This bill right here is given back to them. And for you, Leader Lightford, I say thank you. I'm looking forward to 59 votes on that board. And if you don't vote on this bill, I hope you have a lot of explaining to do when you go home to those people that go to work on a daily basis and can't make ends meet. Thank you, Leader. Thank you for this opportunity to vote on this historic measure, and God bless you.
Senator Ryder, for what purpose you seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. President. To the bill, if I might.
To the bill, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Chamber. I'll be respectful on the time. It's been a long debate. A lot of things have been said. And I don't want to repeat what has been said. I guess I want to start off. Most of the time when people make points and they get up and they do their debates or ask questions and then make their points, they say at the end, well, I'm going to vote yes or I'm going to vote no, and ask the Chamber the rest to do the same. I'm going to just tear that varnish right off from the start, okay? I'm not voting for this, okay? I've never voted for it. God bless the majority leader, because she has tried and tried and tried, and every time I've had the opportunity to vote on this in the Senate, I have voted no. And here's why, is because I represent a district that has all or parts of 14 counties right along the Indiana line. Indiana's minimum wage is $7.25. Now, some of you may think that is too low. Some of you may think that's immoral, and that's I respect that opinion. But the bottom line is that when you raise the cost of doing business, at some point, there's only a handful of things that business owner can do. They can lay employees off, job loss. It happened in 2006. The Illinois Federation of Businesses says it's going to happen again. The governor recognizes it's going to be a problem, because in his public statements he has said what? We're going to try and cushion the blow to small businesses. The sponsor recognizes that, because there is a tax credit, although it's hopelessly complicated, and if you lay off too many people, you don't get the tax credit, but she recognizes it's in there, to her credit. So let's not dismiss the concerns of the fact that this will raise the cost of doing business, and that will result in either someone going out of business, someone getting laid off, or prices going up. 58% of all retail stores in Illinois, 58% are within 25 miles of another state. 1/5 of them, 20%, are within 10 miles. And that is a problem in my district. They will go across the line if prices go up. They will go over there to go out to eat. They will go up there and fill up their gas tanks. We're talking about infrastructure here. We're going to lose those people. And I guess that's the issue that I want to raise here. One of the hardest things in politics is to admit that you don't know what you don't know. And there are things that you don't know in the first week of February that you're going to know at least a little more about in May. Now, this is a little bit of insider baseball, and I guess I'm talking primarily to the newer members on both sides of the aisle, because this is the way this will work. The governor will give his budget address a little bit later this month, and that's when the parade starts. And I don't mean a parade like a parade out in the street. I mean the parade of people who could be walking into your offices asking for money. Now, they won't just be asking for the money that they got last year. They'll be asking for more money they got last year. And if this becomes law, they'll be asking for more money on top of the more money that they asked for last year. What is that number? Well, we don't know. The governor's office testified yesterday in executive committee, and they gave us a chart that says their estimate is that it'll be $82 million, the fiscal impact, direct fiscal impact to the state budget. $82 million in the rest of this fiscal year, almost $300 million next year, and that number goes up, okay? Now, is that right? I don't know. No one in this chamber knows, but I do know one thing, and anyone who's been here for more than like 6 weeks knows this as well. And that is any governor's office estimate of what something will cost in February will cost more in May. That's the way it works, okay? Because those numbers are going to go up. That's just the direct state budget impact. That doesn't count how much more money colleges, universities, the over 800 school districts in this state, the drug and alcohol treatment providers, the mental health providers, and all of the rest who depend upon, to one degree or another, appropriations and support from the state taxpayers in order to do the job that we insist that they do. Now, I understand that this is going to happen. There is going to be a minimum wage increase in this state during this session. My question for you is, why are you in such a hurry? I understand you're adhering yourself to a political deadline that has to do with a speech that's going to happen later this month. The danger here, what you are walking into, is you don't know how much it's going to cost. You have no idea how much it's going to cost. I wish we would have heard more from the people who this is going to impact, particularly the education community. I will be befuddled for weeks to come why they were not at the table in executive committee talking about this. But very soon, they will be on your doorstep in this building asking for the money they would have asked for and even more. What is that going to be? You don't know. One last unknown for you. This state, like every state, tries to provide a social safety net for people of low incomes. How will this affect them? In other words, the programs, because we don't talk about that very much, but I want to talk about a couple of them. The SNAP program, for those of you who aren't familiar with what that is in government parlance, that's food stamps, okay? That's the assistance that the state and federal taxpayers give to people so they have enough food to eat. A single parent working full-time with one child is not eligible for SNAP benefits at $15 per hour. Now, how many of them are there? I don't know. I don't know. But you don't either. And when they call or when they start complaining about losing benefits, what will we do about that? Will we raise the income thresholds? The Child Care Assistance Program, there is a lot of talk in this chamber, rightly so, and it's rightly motivated, Mr. President, about providing families with assistance when it comes to child care. At 185% of the federal poverty level, which is the percentage of the poverty level which Illinois works off of, two-parent household working full-time is not eligible for any child care assistance once they reach $10 per hour. The TANF program, temporary assistance for needy families, a two-parent household working full-time with one child is not eligible at $11.25 per hour. How many of those people are there? The people that you say that you're most concerned with, the people at the lowest rungs of the economic ladder. How many of those people will lose their benefits? How much that will cost to remedy? You don't know the answer to that, and I don't either. And that's why this is not the right time to do this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Last person seeking recognition. Senator Kaler, for what purpose you seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. President. Question to the sponsor.
Sponsor indicates she will yield.
And first I want to make a comment and then ask a question, but Majority Leader Lightford, thank you so much for all your time on this. I hope that when you add the hours up that you in fact have reached the minimum wage on this. So, but I want to thank as well the comments of my colleagues, Senators Hastings, Hutchinson, Collins, and Sandoval. I think you've articulated very well the heart and soul of what this is about, because this is a moral issue, that when people who work full-time still live in poverty, that's a moral issue not only for this state but for this nation. And so we have to address that. Leader, you recognize that we've had some very good discussions amongst our own caucus about just how this affects some of the different areas that we represent in this state. I guess I'd like to have some level of comfort or assurance that that this does not end the discussion about any differences that we might have in economies throughout this state, but that you in fact would be involved in those conversations, and that this will be something that will be carried on as it goes into the House.
Majority Leader Lightford.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will do my best, Senator. Next week we are not here in town, but I will participate via conference call if there's discussions in the House to do anything different from the measure we sent over, Senate Bill 1.
Senator Kaler.
And thank you for that. I think that we have to recognize that this does affect different parts of the state in different ways, and so it's not what we should do. We should be at $15 an hour. We should have a pathway to $15 an hour. What I'm talking about is how we do that, and with that assurance, I would urge an aye vote.
Majority Leader Lightford to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. All I could say is, my. I never thought that I would hear a Republican say that we shouldn't be moving people off the rolls. I've never heard a Republican say we want to keep people on SNAP, that we want to keep them on WIC, we want to keep them on TANF. My entire 20 years here have been Republicans saying we need to move people off the rolls because you never want to fund social service programs. My. Today is the day that we want to assist those same hardworking poor people. We want to give them food stamps. You know why? Because they can't afford to buy food to eat. We want to make sure that they have child care. You didn't care about child care for the last 4 years. Didn't care about funding it for sure. Now today, we care about making sure that kids have child care. You know, it amazed me that you use my own information. I'm just so tickled by the concept that someone would even stand on the floor and advocate for something they've been dead set against publicly for a very long time. A lot was said, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to clarify a few things. One of the things that's really important that we've used clarification on is our university systems. I stepped onto the campus of Western Illinois University 33 years ago. I am a leatherneck. You can't take that away from me. I earned a master's degree from the University of Illinois right here at Springfield. It was Sangamon State University. I was part of the first graduating class of UIS. You can't take that away from me. There's nothing that I would do to harm our university system. It was the previous administration that put us in the hole we're in with our university system. We have a commitment from the governor to ensure that funding goes to our university systems, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. So it's nothing that I would do to harm exactly where I came from. That makes no sense. Not only do we have a commitment for our universities, we also have a commitment for these very programs that, that Senate Republicans care about today. It amazes me that we could talk about a family that earns $16,500 a year. That is the salary of a full-time minimum wage worker, $16,500 a year. The federal poverty wage is $17,160 a year. I didn't make it up. According to President Trump, he said it costs $17,160 to live outside of poverty. Yet here in Illinois, we pay $16,500 for a full-time worker. So we're keeping people in poverty on a national level. That is why you see so many states moving the minimum wage. Because over the past 10 years, 15% rise in the cost of living. But yet their wages have been held for the last 9 years. How do you keep up with a 15% cost in living if your wages never grow? You do what Senator Hutchins said, you work 2-3 jobs, you wake up when it's dark, and you leave your family. And you work a job, then you hop on the bus, and you go to the next job. And then you come home at night when it's dark. And guess what? You do all of that because you want dignity. You don't want to live on SNAP. You don't want to wait for people to say, here is your housing voucher. You want to be able to pay your own rent. These are hardworking people every day. So I encourage us to stop trying to keep people poor. When we talk about rural Illinois, one of the senators that stood up and spoke about it, he's already got something on his web right now. It's a big joke to you. It's a farce. You wanted to speak on the Senate floor so you can go post. You wanted to post. It's already there. And what's so amazing is that rural Illinois, I have a study too. The National Employment Law Project says in rural Illinois, they should be making today $14.58. Yet, they're at 8.25. They won't see that amount until 2025. So there is a phase-in, ladies and gentlemen. The business credit is important because Democrats care about business too. We want to make sure that there are jobs for people to go to. We want to make sure that those businesses are thriving and expanding, and we want to make sure that this credit is clearly understood. Senator, it's monitored after the EDGE credit that's been around since 1999. It's monitored after the small business tax credit that's been around since 2010. This is not a new credit that's hard to understand. And lucky for us, we have a new director of revenue who's willing to ensure that it's easily understood for all of those who want to apply for that credit. So ladies and gentlemen, here's what my closing is. A $15 minimum wage increase actually creates economic activity. It decreases the reliance on government. What is known is that there's a surplus, the power, the engines are turning, people have more money, they spend more. We're looking to see them generate $19 billion in economics. $19 billion back into the state of Illinois. Just because they're working, they're earning what they're working for, they're able to maybe buy an extra state. What I also know is that it's long overdue. It's terribly long overdue. So the real question is, why have we waited so long? The time is now, ladies and gentlemen, the Senate. I encourage you to vote aye, and I would even encourage those on the other side of the aisle who believes that this is not the right thing to do, who believe that they would never ever support a minimum wage increase, vote for your constituents who also live in poverty. I encourage an aye vote.
The question is, shall Senate Bill 1 pass? All those in favor vote aye. Opposed, nay. The voting is open. Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Take the record. On that question, there are 39 voting aye, 18 voting nay, 0 voting present. Senate Bill 1, having received the required constitutional majority, is declared passed.